name is Bryson, and today I'm going to be covering Chapter 2 of Alexei Kaptarev's book, Presentation Secrets, which details a general overview on how to prepare for making a presentation. And so I will be condensing his ideas and advice, as well as throwing in some of my own thoughts and opinions here and there, and talking about the things to consider in forming a presentation, such as the goal to have in mind, how it should all be structured, as well as a number of other things. And so the very first and most crucial thing to do when you sit down to start working on a presentation is to set a goal. Sounds deceivingly simple, and it's because of this simplicity that it often gets overlooked. Having a goal in mind going into the brainstorming process is extremely important, because without one, you're almost certain to get derailed and lose sight of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But that's not to say that your goal can be just anything. It needs to have a little more to it than to just present information. Well, yes, this is the most basic purpose of any type of presentation. Having that as your only ambition will severely limit how effective your presentation is and how much the audience will remember it. For your goal to actually benefit you, it should meet a few general standards. For starters, it must only be a single core idea. This is the aspect that people often struggle with the most, as when you start a presentation, you have a million ideas swirling around in your head about what you want to say and how you want to say it. But for your presentation to be the most effective, it needs to be centered around a central idea in order to stay cohesive. Now, don't worry, you can change that goal as you start to work through the presentation, but at all times, you need to have just one idea that you can always reference back to. This goal always has to be also has to be fairly specific. Like I mentioned before, it needs to be a little more than just to inform the audience. It needs to be enough to challenge both you and the audience. This way, you are both forced to be invested in the topic and will be much more likely to remember and act on what was said. And what I mean by that is to try and avoid telling the audience something they already know or telling it in a way that you know is familiar to them, just because you're afraid of upsetting them by introducing something new. Now, I know that sounds complicated, so I'm going to cover it more later on, but just know that a good general rule of thumb to follow in order to avoid all this is to ask yourself what you want the audience to do after hearing what you have to say and turn that into your goal. When deciding on a goal, it is also often good to make sure that it can be measured or quantified. By doing this, you are able to track how much progress you've made towards meeting your goal and always have an idea of how much more work you need to do. Having a goal that meets all of these criteria is so important to ending up with a great presentation because it ensures that everything is interconnected and has a deeper meaning. A common rule heard in creating something, be it a paper, a speech, or even art, is to work with the audience in mind, to have your creation cater to them in a sense so that it better appeals to them. And while yes, this rule applies to presentations as well, it needs to be approached with careful consideration. Trying too much to simply please the audience can lead to your message losing its impact and memorability. The purpose of a presentation is to convey something new, and that can't happen if you've centered everything around what they're already comfortable with. Don't limit your vision based on the limits of the audience. Instead, push past them and introduce them to something they've never seen or thought of before, and that will make your presentation truly impactful. It's also important to include your own opinions and views in the presentation. Do not be afraid to create a sort of controversy. Without a sense of conflict, what you're saying can become boring to the audience, and once again, you won't have that desired impact on them that you're looking for. Although, as with anything, all of this should be taken in careful moderation. While it's not crucial for the audience to like you in order to have an impact on them, creating too much of a disconnect with them can cause them to lose sight of what you're saying and derail the interaction altogether. So now that you've decided on your single purposeful goal and the approach that you're going to take with the audience, it's really tempting to just jump straight into making the slides and just start tweaking them after you're done until you finally come up with something that you're happy with. And yes, this is a viable option, but most of the time going down this road leads to you getting caught up in the little details and losing focus of the overall message. Instead, it's often better to start by gathering all of your ideas and getting them recorded so that you can begin to visualize where you want the presentation to go and how you want it all to be structured. One of the best ways to go about this is through a process known as mind mapping. This is the type of brainstorming that allows you to record all your ideas however you see fit, as well as the connections between them. What's good about using this process is that it allows you to put absolutely all of your ideas down without having to worry about where or how they're going to be used in the presentation. Instead, you're just able to put it all out there and then start to whittle down what you want to use. There are a number of great software packages out there designed to do just this, such as Mind Manager or FreeMind, just to name a few, both of which are great products that will surely make your presentation easier. And so now that you've got all your ideas down and started to form the connections between them, you're probably more than ready to jump into putting them all on the slides and throwing the whole thing together. But we're still not quite there yet. Having all of your ideas written down is great, but for the most part, they're still all over the place. So now it's typically best to start outlining your slides so that you know ahead of time how all those ideas are going to be structured and how they're all going to fit together. There are several ways to go about doing this, from using sticky notes to online software, all of which are very useful and effective. It's up to you to find which way works best for you. Personally, I use Microsoft's OneNote when outlining my presentations, but like I said, there are plenty of other great options out there. And a great feature to look out for is something that allows you to visualize your structure. Having this ability can really help you to better understand how you want to approach everything. However, there are some certain methods to avoid. Most notably, try to avoid any sort of word processor, as they take your focus away from the overall structure and get you caught up in the details, just like starting with the slides would. Now that you've found the method that works best for you, let's talk about how to actually use it. First off, you want to take all those ideas that you gathered while brainstorming and mind mapping and break them all down to their simplest form. You don't need to worry about full sentences or grammar. Just make it a short generalization of what the idea is. Next up is to start forming the hierarchy of your slides. In order to do that, you're going to want to decide on the categories that you want to use. This gives you a basis for how to group your ideas and how the overall flow of the presentation is going to go. After that, it's time to fill up those categories with your ideas that you simplified. Now, chances are you'll have too many ideas to include, and not all of them will fit under one of the categories you chose, and that's okay. So this means that you have to decide on which ideas you feel are important enough to include, and of those, what relations that they have to each other that you want to highlight. Having everything structured out beforehand like this is extremely helpful. It gives you a roadmap for all the subsequent work you're going to do on the slides, and most importantly, it ensures that you never lose focus of the big picture. Now, that's not to say that you have to follow this structure to a T, and that everything is set in stone once you do this. All of this can be tweaked down the line as you work with it more and more and gain a better understanding of it, fine-tuning what it is that you want to say and how you want to say it. What's important that this gives you an idea of what you want to do beforehand, instead of just jumping in blind and figuring it all out later. Now, once you've gotten all this done, you're all set to start crafting the message you want to get across. You've got what you want to say. Now it's time to figure out how you want to say it, which is almost just as important. No matter how important what it is that you have to say, the audience will not listen to you if you don't convey that message in a memorable way. You have to make what you have to say interesting so that the audience will remember it. And this is probably the hardest part of making a presentation, because there are so many countless ways to do this. But the best ways to go about it are to turn your presentation into a story. Why is that? Because stories are interesting. They capture our attention and have us hanging off every word, just waiting to find out what comes next. If you can capture the magic of storytelling in your presentation, your audience will remember what you had to say for years down the line. And after you've taken all these steps, you're finally ready to start building your presentation. And so, just to reiterate everything I've talked about today, the most important things to keep in mind when first approaching a presentation are to fight that temptation to jump straight into the slides and instead come up with a goal that will guide you throughout the entirety of your time spent working on the project. To stick to your own views instead of conforming to those of the audience. and that having an outline will make your presentation much more cohesive and organized. And remember, these are all just general things to keep in mind. Taking them and altering them to fit your style will only make